the rich son that had no regard for his parents. In a remote village nestled in the eastern hills, there lived a family of 7. Ezi, the father, was a well-known figure, respected by his neighbors despite the struggles life had dealt him. Paralyzed from the waist down, Ezi's spirit was unbreakable. He worked tirelessly to provide for his family, laboring on his small patch of land and crafting simple goods he sold in the village. His wife was a homemaker, devoted to caring for their children, nurturing them with love and kindness. Years passed, and the children grew. One by one, they found their way into adulthood, and eventually, the second son, Obinna, set his sights on the bustling city. Ambitious and full of dreams, he craved more than the village could offer. With the blessings of his parents, he left, promising to return and uplift his family once he found success. Luck smiled on Obinna almost immediately. He landed a job as a delivery man, making enough to sustain himself, and before long he crossed paths with Katie, a wealthy woman with a taste for luxury and a fascination with the young man's rugged charm. Katie was much older, but her wealth and influence became a doorway for Obinna. She pulled him into her world, providing him with financial help and a glimpse into a lifestyle he had only dreamed of. Their relationship, which began with deliveries, evolved into companionship, and eventually Katie became his benefactor. In time, Obinna's small aspirations grew grander. With Katie's support, he launched a business, bringing goods from across borders to the city's eager buyers. His venture flourished beyond his wildest imagination, and his name became known among the city's elites. Katie passed away a few years later, leaving him with resources and connections that allowed him to reach even greater heights. Back in the village, however, life took a cruel turn. Ezi's health deteriorated, the years of hardship weighing heavily on his aging frame. With few options, he reached out to Obinna, hoping his now wealthy son would lend him a hand. But Obinna had changed. The man who had once been a loving son now looked down upon his roots, embarrassed by his humble beginnings. When he finally agreed to help, it was only to silence the gossip that had begun to circulate about his neglect. He brought his father to the city, but left him in the small, cramped quarters of his staff. Ez was sent to a cheap hospital, where Obinna visited sparingly, often reminding his father of the burden he had become. As Ez's condition worsened, Obinna's visits stopped. He hired one of his domestic workers to tend to his father's wounds, advising him to use salt to clean them instead of proper medication. The pain was agonizing, and Ez's cries echoed through the small staff quarters. But to Obinna, they were nothing more than background noise. Ez suffered in silence, his heart broken by his son's callousness. One day, unable to bear the torment any longer, he passed away, his spirit crushed as much as his body. For the burial, Obinna spared no expense, erecting a grand tomb and organizing a lavish ceremony, not out of love, but to preserve his public image. The villagers praised him, seeing only the appearance of a devoted son. Behind the scenes, however, Obinna's siblings watched with bitter resentment, aware of the truth. Obinna's mother fell ill soon after, her heart weakened by grief. She too sought her son's help, but each request was met with contempt. Afraid and heartbroken, she endured his neglect, the memory of her husband's suffering fresh in her mind. When her strength faded, she resorted to adult diapers, too frail to make it to the bathroom. Yet Obinna remained indifferent, ignoring her needs and dismissing her pleas. Eventually, she passed on, leaving a void that Obinna felt only momentarily. For a brief period, guilt gnawed at him, but success and wealth soon drowned out any remorse. He convinced himself that they had deserved their fate, labeling them as burdens, who hadn't understood the value of hard work as he did. With his parents gone, he turned his back on the village completely, severing the last ties to his family. But Karma, quiet and patient, waited. Not long after his mother's funeral, tragedy struck. Obinna was involved in a devastating car accident. His right leg was shattered beyond repair, and doctors had no choice but to amputate it. His lavish lifestyle came to a halt. The wheelchair his father had once used became his only way of getting around. Worse still, the accident had fractured several of his ribs, causing internal damage that left him weak and constantly in need of care. In a cruel twist of fate, he now relied on the very same items he had scorned his parents for needing: the adult diapers and the crude medical attention. Hospitals became his second home, his fortune dwindling rapidly with each passing day as medical bills piled up. The city friends who had once showered him with admiration disappeared, leaving him alone in his suffering. Obinna's wife, Jane, who had watched him disregard his parents with a heavy heart, did her best to care for him. But as the months passed, even she grew weary of his bitterness and regret. She reminded him gently of the love and care he had refused to give to his own family, but her words only deepened his guilt. One night, in the lonely silence of his hospital room, Obinna wept, his tears born from a sorrow far deeper than any physical pain. He remembered his father's face, etched with suffering and betrayal. He saw his mother, frail and desperate for his love, left alone in her final moments. Regret swallowed him whole, an unrelenting ache in his soul that no amount of wealth could soothe. And so, Obinna spent his final years haunted by the ghosts of his past, tormented by the kindness he had withheld, and burdened by a remorse that would never leave him. When he passed, his death was quiet and unmarked, a sad echo of the life he had built on callousness. The villagers who had once praised him had long forgotten his name, and in the end he was buried in a small, unremarkable grave, a final testament to a life that had once been full of promise but was ultimately empty. The village elders would tell his story for generations to come, a cautionary tale of the man who had abandoned his own blood, only to be abandoned by the very fortune he had pursued. And in the hearts of those who listened, Obinna's legacy remained, a reminder that true wealth lies in love and kindness, not in riches or power. I hope you learned something from this story. Please remember to share and subscribe for more interesting stories. Thank you.